Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are opening up, well, a really remarkable file, a stack of sources that basically trace the architectural blueprints of massive, self-perpetuating wealth.
Yeah, we're talking about fortunes that don't just exist within the economy. They actively reshape the rules of engagement for everyone else.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. The material we've got, it spans centuries, right? It covers everything from 19th century oil barons, Asian financial godfathers.
All the way to the hyperspeed mechanics of 21st century finance and, the revolutionary risk posed by digital algorithms like AI.
So our mission really is to perform a kind of surgery on this material. We want to extract the core operating principles, the non-obvious strategies maybe, that let individuals and families amass and maintain these fortunes. Fortunes so vast they become structural forces in society.
We're basically looking for the timeless, repeatable blueprints of the world's richest. And what's absolutely fascinating as you dig in is how little the fundamental playbook changes, even when the technology, changes completely.
That consistency, that feels like the key insight here. Whether the core product is kerosene or e-commerce software or trading data measured in milliseconds, we're going to see the same strategic patterns pop up again and again. Things like an obsessive pursuit of efficiency,
Right.
absolute control over the supply chain, or maybe the information flow,
Right.
extreme operational secrecy.
And critically, the calculated use of political and regulatory influence. That's always in the mix.
And to really understand the present, I think we have to start with the past, don't we?
Absolutely. The earliest industrial empires, they really established foundational rules for consolidation that, frankly, still govern places like Silicon Valley today.
So let's dive into that historical foundation, starting with this intense, almost religious drive for efficiency we see in the first true tycoons.
Right. When we read about titans like John D. Rockefeller Sr., we tend to focus on the end result, Standard Oil's dominance.
Yeah, the monopoly itself.
Exactly. But the sources, they really stress that the secret wasn't just scale initially. It was hyper-efficiency, radical cost reduction. It was baked right into the DNA of the operation from day one.
So it's this aspiration for like total self-sufficiency in business,
Yeah.
going way beyond just simple cost cutting.
Precisely. Rockefeller seems to have viewed every external supplier almost as a weakness, a source of potential loss or disruption. His focus was all about insulating the enterprise from those external costs and uncertainties, like building a fortress of efficiency.
The details you find are pretty amazing. It wasn't just enough to buy supplies cheaply. He hired his own plumber.
Yeah.
He set up his own timberlands, ran a massive cooper shop, effectively becoming one of the nation's biggest makers of wooden barrels. I mean, why go to all that trouble, making your own barrels?
Well, it was a strategic imperative, really rooted in logistics. During the oil boom back then, barrels the containers you needed to ship the product, they were constantly in short supply.
Right.
And the quality was all over the place, inconsistent. So by producing their own, Rockefeller gained total control over that supply. He ensured consistency, and maybe more importantly, he eliminated the profit margin of the supplier.
Oh, okay.
And that translated directly into a stable, lower cost base that, frankly, no competitor relying on outside barrel makers could possibly match.
So he locked in guaranteed profit even when the market prices were going crazy, just because his cost structure was fundamentally better.
Yeah, and that's only like half the story of the thrift part. The other really brilliant early move was figuring out how to profitably use waste.
Right.
Early oil refining produced just massive amounts of acidic residue, other byproducts, stuff that was actually costly to just get rid of.
Right. An environmental headache even then.
Totally. Rockefeller pioneered profitable ways to convert these residues into usable goods. Things like fertilizer, lubricating oils, even petroleum jelly came out of that.
Wow. So he created a revenue stream from what everyone else saw as just costly garbage.
Exactly. Another buffer against the industry's volatility.
So, okay, despite the oil industry being known for these cataclysmic booms and busts, that intense focus on self-sufficiency and thrift meant Standard Oil never experienced a single year of financial loss.
Oh, whoa.
That's a blueprint for foundational resilience that you just don't see prioritized much in modern startups, do you?
Not in the same way, no. And once that cost efficiency was just rock solid, the next logical step was moving from efficiency to, well, outright market control.
Okay.
The sources detail how they started by trying to formalize cartels, but these structures were inherently unstable, just basic economic incentives working against them.
And that instability, that brings us to the famous free rider problem, doesn't it? Can you walk us through the mechanics of that? Because it really shines a light on why consolidation became almost inevitable.
Sure. So early attempts to control the price of refined oil often involve forming these cartels, like Rockefeller's Pittsburgh Plan.
Right.
The members agree, okay, we'll limit production. That reduces supply, pushes prices up, good for everyone inside the cartel.
Makes sense.
But there's always an opportunistic refiner, the free rider, who stays outside the cartel. They get to enjoy the higher price that the cartel created through its sacrifices, but they aren't bound by the production limits, so they just produce as much as they want at the artificially inflated price.
That sounds like, well, a guaranteed way for the cartel to just fall apart. The outsider makes a killing and everyone else wants to leave too.
Exactly. The free riders strategy just completely undercuts the cartel's stability. So to maintain those market prices, the cartel is basically forced to either shelter and protect that free rider, maybe by absorbing their output.
Which costs them money.
Right. Or, more often, they just have to buy them out entirely. And this shows a really key insight. The goal of consolidation isn't always just to crush every small competitor individually.
Okay.
The goal, as the sources seem to suggest, is to create a market structure where the entire industry is ultimately forced to rely on your stability, and eventually they get absorbed by your superior capital and infrastructure.
Wow. Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting then. The ultimate monopoly isn't necessarily about crushing rivals with a better product.
Not always, no.
It's about making it economically irrational for rivals to even exist outside your sphere of control.
That's a great way to put it. Now, shifting gears a bit from the individual company to global economic structures, the sources give us some really crucial historical context on wealth concentration.
Right.
If you look at Europe, say France, Britain, Sweden, around 1900, 1910, the level of wealth concentration was just astounding.
How concentrated?
The richest 10% own nearly 90% of the nation's total wealth.
90% for the top 10. Wow.
And the wealthiest 1% alone, they held over 50%, half the wealth.
Those numbers. That's pure Gilded Age hierarchy, isn't it? But the sources mentioned this hyper-concentration was, well, interrupted by the 20th century.
It was, yeah. The major structural transformation that really characterized the 20th century was the growth of a true, broad-based, patrimonial middle class, meaning a population with meaningful, inheritable wealth. This was driven by a bunch of factors: post-war growth, stronger unions, more progressive taxation, things like that.
Okay.
However, the sources note that today we seem to be witnessing a return to high inequality, but it's maybe combining two historical types of unequal societies.
Okay. What are those two types?
Well, the first is the historical society of rentiers. That's based on inherited wealth. People who primarily live off capital returns, they inherited their fortune.
Got it. And the second?
The second type is the modern society of supermanagers. These are folks who accrue massive wealth primarily through highly compensated labor income. Think top finance, top tech execs.
Right. Huge salaries and stock options, not necessarily old money.
Exactly. And the concern raised by this synthesis, this combination, is that today, especially in the U.S., these two logics might be merging.
So what happens if the highest labor income earners, the supermanagers, also become the largest inheritors? What are the implications there?
Well, the implication is potentially the formation of a really rigid, intensified form of inequality that we haven't quite seen before. See, historically, rentier wealth was somewhat static. New fortunes could often disrupt it.
Right.
But if supermanager wealth is massive and it rapidly converts into inheritable capital, then the ability for new players to break into that elite structure diminishes drastically.
So mobility freezes up.
Right. This combination risks creating a new world of inequality that some argue could be more extreme than any that preceded it, because wealth concentrates permanently at the very top.
So whether your source of wealth is inherited land from centuries ago or a billion-dollar stock option payout today, if you control that capital, you basically control the rules.
That seems to be the pattern.
Now let's pivot a bit away from these Western industrial models. Let's look at what the sources call the Asian Godfather playbook. It seems to operate on a different axis of power.
Yeah, this model contrasts pretty sharply with Rockefeller's intense focus on industrial efficiency. Here, the primary blueprint for getting wealthy is about securing political protection and getting state-granted monopoly licenses.
Okay, give us an example.
Look at Lok Yew in Malaya. He built this huge empire by working really closely with the British colonial rulers.
Right.
But he also needed control at the street level, which meant maintaining close ties with Chinese secret societies specifically. the powerful Gihin triad.
So it's sort of triangulation of power. Colonial government, secret societies, and himself in the middle.
Exactly. That triangulated control was essential. He used the triads to manage and control the Chinese populations, provisioning mining gangs, ensuring labor stability for the mines.
Okay.
And at the same time, he secured these incredibly lucrative state revenue farm licenses, basically controlling the sales of essentials and, well, vices like opium, liquor, and gambling.
So he became indispensable to the colonial powers.
Absolutely. He essentially privatized the collection of a huge chunk of the state's fiscal revenue. And he was rewarded handsomely, for it eventually even got a British knighthood.
So it's empire building based on license and patronage, not optimizing the cost of kerosene. Right.
Completely different model. And the result of this rapid, politically secured cash flow was this kind of bizarre strategy the sources call random diversification.
Random diversification, what does that mean?
Well, because they often operated in environments where competition was limited by the state, they just generated too much easy cash and credit. They didn't reinvest obsessively back into the core business like Rockefeller did.
Okay.
Instead, they scattered their fortunes through this random diversification across hundreds of private companies, multiple listed vehicles, just spreading it out.
But wait, if the initial wealth was based on political stability and those licenses, why spread the assets randomly? Why not just double down on what was working?
Because the randomness itself is the hedge. It's a crucial hedge against political risk.
Ah, I see.
These monopoly cash flows, kind of counterintuitively, encourage the monopolists to scatter their money because the main existential threat they face is never market competition. It's a shift in the political landscape.
Right. New government, new rules, and new favorites.
Exactly. So you own many different assets, often in different jurisdictions, in case the political winds in a godfather's home state blow from a different direction, as one source puts it. It's a strategy designed purely for political survival, not necessarily economic synergy.
Okay, so we've established that control over infrastructure, whether it's physical things like barrels or political things like licenses, is paramount. Now, moving into the 21st century, that principle holds, but the infrastructure, it shifts dramatically, doesn't it, to bits, bytes, and logistics.
Absolutely. And the rise of massive digital retailers like Amazon perfectly illustrates this pivot. I mean, they didn't invent the department store, obviously.
No.
But they engineered a superior capital structure, one designed to finance their growth using essentially other people's money. This is the famous negative operating cycle.
That sounds like some kind of financial wizardry, almost designed to baffle competitors. How does Amazon manage to get paid and have interest-free working capital at the same time?
Well, the mechanism is actually pretty elegant in its simplicity, but highly destructive to traditional retail models. When you, the customer, use your credit card to buy something on Amazon,
Yeah.
Amazon gets that cash immediately. But Amazon, because it's so huge, has contracts with its distributors and suppliers that allow it to settle its own accounts only every few months, maybe 60 or 90 days later.
Whoa. So the customer pays instantly,
Yeah.
Amazon gets the cash, and they get to hold on to it for like up to 3 months before they actually have to pay their supplier.
Precisely. This delay means that, as the source says, with every sale, Amazon put more cash in the bank. This steady stream of capital, generated not by outside investors, but by the sheer volume of their own sales, is effectively an interest-free loan.
Generated by their customers and suppliers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it continuously finances their operations, their expansion, their tech investments. Traditional retailers, they have to borrow money to finance their inventory. Amazon's inventory basically finances Amazon.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
It really explains how they could just relentlessly drive down prices while still investing so heavily in long-term infrastructure like warehousing and tech.
And they mastered market perception too, right? Perfecting this dual identity that really unsettled competitors.
Right.
Claiming to be both the low-cost leader, like Walmart,
Right.
and the customer service champion, like Nordstrom's.
Yeah, that's a tricky line to walk.
And just like Rockefeller turned his internal barrel-making operation into a competitive edge, Amazon turned its internal logistics capability into an external profit center through fulfillment by Amazon or FBA.
Right, where other sellers use Amazon's warehouses.
Exactly. They'd built such a sophisticated, massive network that other merchants were willing to pay them good money just to use it. So they stopped just selling products and started selling the infrastructure of digital commerce itself, securing a superior position by controlling the flow of goods.
This obsession with logistics, efficiency, it leads us pretty inevitably to the contemporary focus on speed, doesn't it? But a kind of speed that's measured in, well, humanly imperceptible fractions. I had millisecond.
Yeah, this is the realm of high-frequency trading, HFT, a world where tiny fractional speed advantages generate just colossal, almost guaranteed wealth. Firms like Citadel, Gecko, they achieve this supremacy through something called co-location.
Co-location, that's the
Yeah.
physical act, right? Placing their trading servers in the exact same building, often in the very same data room, as the stock exchange's main computer, the matching engine. Why is that specific physical proximity so absolutely critical?
It really just boils down to latency, the time delay in data transmission. Even data zipping through fiber optic cables takes time. Light speed isn't instantaneous over distance. So by minimizing the physical distance, often down to just a few feet, they ensure they receive market data and can submit their orders fractions of a second before competitors who might be, say, miles away or even across town.
And that fractional lead, what does it let them do?
It lets them observe orders arriving at the exchange and immediately front-run those orders. They see what others are about to do and trade ahead of them.
How small are we talking here? The sources mentioned 3 milliseconds. I mean, that's an impossible gap for a human to even perceive, let alone react to.
It's utterly imperceptible to human speed. 3 milliseconds.
Yeah.
That's 50 times faster than the blink of an eye. And the sources explain that this hyperspeed has fundamentally changed how markets work. It's tripled the value, apparently, of a customer's simple stock market order.
Triple the value. Why?
Because the individual investor's quote is essentially late to the market, maybe a full second or more behind these HFT firms, which makes them, in the trader's rather brutal parlance, easy kill.
So the average person trying to buy some stock isn't really trading against other average investors anymore. They're trading against these algorithmic predators who know their intentions before their orders even fully process.
That's pretty much the picture painted, yes.
Oh.
It's like an invisible tax on the market. And the sheer difficulty of even diagnosing this kind of predation is noted in the sources. Apparently, traders who built these systems would often hear their clients claim they saw it happen.
But they couldn't have, not at that speed.
Exactly. It's humanly undetectable. The advantage is pure information arbitrage, secured by a physical infrastructure advantage, and it generates enormous, repeatable rents, basically skimmed from all the other market participants.
Right. So if that's the impact of high-speed digital infrastructure, let's look at the ultimate frictionless scaling. The revolutionary threat posed by digital algorithms themselves, particularly AI.
Right. The AI revolution is potentially unique and maybe destabilizing in a way previous industrial revolutions weren't, and it's primarily because of its distribution model.
How so?
Digital algorithms. They can be distributed globally at virtually no cost, zero marginal cost. And they can be improved and updated for free simultaneously everywhere. Unlike steam engines or assembly lines, there are almost no legacy costs tied to manufacturing, shipping, or installation.
That completely changes the competitive calculus, doesn't it? Low labor costs somewhere else in the world provides basically no advantage against a product that costs nothing to replicate and distribute globally.
And it changes the targets, too. These algorithms are rolling out quickly, and the prediction is they'll take the largest chunk out of white-collar and specialized information jobs first.
Why white collar specifically?
Because so much of that work, think legal research, financial analysis, technical support, medical diagnosis, involves taking in and processing information to make a decision or a recommendation.
Which is precisely what AI algorithms trained on massive data sets do best. And fastest. Now, this isn't just the usual creative destruction argument where old jobs get replaced by new ones. The sources warn that this process might actually break capitalism's traditional self-correcting mechanisms.
That is the core societal risk highlighted, yeah. In a traditional market, human labor always has a sort of floor. A lower cost of labor can provide a competitive edge somewhere.
Right.
But if low-cost human labor provides no competitive edge over machines, and if these data-driven monopolies are forever self-reinforcing because they own the exclusive data input that trains the AI, then those traditional economic safety valves just vanish.
And the potential outcome.
Well, the risk is creating what some call a 21st century caste system, dividing the population into a high-value AI elite who design and control the systems, and, well, what some analysts have very crudely termed the useless class.
Meaning people who simply cannot generate enough economic value to support themselves in a fully automated economy.
Yeah, it's a fundamental challenge to the whole social contract, isn't it?
Okay, so once that extreme wealth and power are secured, The focus seems to shift pretty dramatically. It moves from pure acquisition to, well, maintenance, protection.
Definitely. The empire's goal becomes protecting its infrastructure, its information advantage, and maybe most importantly, its public image, controlling the narrative.
The Rockefellers learned this PR lesson the hard way, didn't they? After things like the Ludlow massacre and some really critical early press coverage.
They did. They realized pretty quickly that pure operational efficiency wasn't enough. They need this protective layer of public affairs, of image management. John D. Rockefeller Jr. and the PR pioneer Ivy Lee, they basically established the modern formula for corporate PR success.
Which was?
Actively taking popular opinion into account before you enact any new policy or make a big move. Shape the perception first.
So it's proactive narrative control, not just reacting to criticism.
Exactly. Even Rockefeller Sr., who was legendary for his policy of just absolute silence, he reluctantly agreed to an open-ended interview late in his life, but only on the explicit condition that they shall not take up anything controversial.
Got to keep it sanitized.
Always.
Yeah.
And that requirement for a controlled narrative, it persists today, maybe even magnified by the speed of digital information. You just have to look at the case of Elizabeth Holmes at Theranos.
Right.
The company's whole supposed innovation was built on this foundation of extreme corporate secrecy. She required NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, not just from every employee, but from every single visitor who walked in the door.
Wow.
And the internal flow of information was ruthlessly compartmentalized, terrified of proprietary information leaking out. It really shows how paranoia can become a central tool for empire preservation.
And this obsession with control, it feels like a thread running through all these eras of massive wealth. You mentioned Howard Hughes earlier, the 20th century figure. His legendary, almost pathological control. It was channeled through a single phone number and operations center.
Yeah. Operations, OL 42500. A room apparently manned 24/7.
And the detail in the sources is incredible. It says every single message, every action, no matter how trivial, even a staff assistant asking to leave their hotel room was typed into a chronological log.
Yeah. Just think about that. It guaranteed that Hughes was constantly systematically aware of every transaction, every tiny detail happening anywhere in his empire.
Total information control equals total strategic control, making sure no decision happens, even way down the chain, without his potential input or knowledge.
That's the idea.
Okay, this intense need for control, for secrecy. It really raises a necessary question, doesn't it? How much of this extreme wealth, whether it's old money or new tech fortunes, is built on genuine meritocratic effort versus, well, calculated market manipulation, intense secrecy, and sometimes outright scandal?
That's a really important question, and the sources provide quite a bit of evidence that manipulation has often been a core component, not just a side effect. I mean, look at the insider trading scandals that rocked Wall Street in the 1980s.
Right. Boyesky, Levine.
Exactly. The arbitrager Ivan Bileski agreeing to cooperate after being charged with trading on inside information provided by Dennis Levine. It sent shockwaves through the financial world.
And the sources kind of convey how brazen that culture was back then. Levine, after he started cooperating, apparently detailed how easy it was to just dupe SEC lawyers when he was under oath.
Yeah, offering these convoluted, sometimes nonsensical explanations like claiming he overheard some pinstriped guys talking about a hostile bid on a train.
Right, anything to conceal the actual calculated exchange of privileged inside information. It suggests the financial world was running on a private, hidden set of rules just for insiders.
And that manipulation wasn't just limited to individual stock tips either. The LIBOR manipulation scandal, more recently, reveals this deep structural corruption based on personal networks.
LIBOR being the interest rate benchmark, right?
Exactly. Brokers like this guy, Terry Farr, apparently operated within a back-scratching quid pro quo world. They'd leverage relationships with traders and the rate submitters at rival banks to nudge the official rate submissions for their own or their clients' benefit.
So basically corrupting a fundamental market standard through institutional favors and personal connections.
Pretty much, yeah. It shows how deep that could go.
The famous LBO leveraged buyout wars of the 1980s also shine a light on the absolute importance of insider knowledge, don't they?
Oh, massively. Henry Kravis, during that huge RJR Nabisco bid,
Yeah.
he desperately needed deep proprietary knowledge of the target company. The source says he was acutely aware that he had never made a major takeover bid without the analytical help of a management team that knew its company inside and out.
So he needed the insiders on his side.
He needed their knowledge. That information asymmetry was so vital that Kravis apparently admitted he had to lie. It was a lie, more or less, he said to the RJR CEO Ross Johnson, just to keep him involved in the bid process.
Huh.
It really underscores this powerful strategic blueprint. The ultimate advantage in high-stakes finance isn't always just having more money. It's having access to that internal, often unquantifiable knowledge that only deep company insiders possess.
Okay, so when these operations, these empires, reach the scale of global banks or massive tech monopolies,
Hmm.
they often achieve this unique kind of political status, right? Which leads to what the sources term the failure to police the giants.
Yeah, this is the whole phenomenon of too big to jail. It really came to the fore after the 2008 financial crisis. Prosecutors became consciously worried, apparently, about actually charging a globally interconnected firm whose entire business hinged on public confidence.
Because charging them could cause a collapse.
Exactly. The worry was that charging a major bank with a criminal offense could potentially collapse the institution itself and trigger a much wider economic crisis, systemic risk.
So the system kind of shifts. Instead of seeking punishment, it seeks rehabilitation. The focus moves to trying to reform the internal culture rather than imposing traditional criminal penalties.
That's what seemed to happen. And predictably, this political leverage was quickly exploited by the banking industry itself. They pointed out, quite correctly, that tens of thousands of jobs, maybe the global financial infrastructure itself, were on the line if a major institution was criminally charged.
So the size itself becomes immunity.
That inherent contradiction, that the sheer size and interconnectedness of the organization grants it a form of immunity from traditional legal consequences, it was starkly criticized at the time. Congressional critics even printed up these mock monopoly-style get-out-of-jail-free cards.
Seriously?
Yeah, apparently reading, "Your bank has been deemed too big to jail by the U.S. Department of Justice." It just perfectly highlights a system where size can confer unparalleled political protection.
And that structural reality, that protection,
Hmm.
it leads directly to the final strategic blueprint we see, doesn't it? The active politicalization of wealth. Moving beyond just defense to actually going on offense by embedding wealth deep into the political machinery.
Absolutely. The Koch brothers offer a kind of classic modern case study of this in the U.S. Originally, they were these far-right libertarians who actually thought the mainstream Republican Party, even Ronald Reagan, was too moderate, a sellout.
Okay.
Yet they only became major Republican funders and really strategic political operators after a serious governmental investigation threatened their core business operations.
So their massive political engagement wasn't initially driven by trying to achieve ideological purity. It was driven by the practical realization that they needed institutional protection, a shield.
Exactly. As one source puts it, the pivot was about acquiring corporate defense capabilities in Washington. It was fundamentally about power. The political spending became, essentially, an essential cost of doing business, ensuring that regulatory scrutiny was minimized or shaped in their favor. It just demonstrates that necessary relationship between massive wealth and proactive political intervention.
And this pattern,
Wow.
it's probably even more direct, more explicit in authoritarian systems, right? Like the example of Vladimir Putin's actions in Russia.
Oh, absolutely. In Russia, Putin systematically oversaw the creation of these giant state corporations. But crucially, these corporations were controlled by his personal allies, guys he'd known for years, brought with him from St. Petersburg.
So it wasn't just about enriching his friends.
No, not just that. He used these corporate positions, which controlled massive cash flows and provided vast opportunities for patronage, to consolidate state control over strategic revenue-generating industries like oil with Rosneft or arms manufacturing with Rosaboron Export.
So the empire of wealth becomes structurally intertwined with the state itself. Loyalty is guaranteed through financial access, and the state gets control.
Precisely. It's a closed loop of power and money. Hashtag outro.
So where does this all leave us? We've traced the evolution of this empire blueprint across, 3 centuries now? We've seen Rockefeller's obsessive vertical integration guaranteeing profit, the Asian godfathers securing wealth through political license, the digital giants achieving that frictionless scaling using interest-free negative capital cycles.
Right. And the high-frequency traders' absolute reliance on milliseconds of speed for their edge.
Yeah. The common thread running through every single successful strategy we looked at seems to be the strategic cultivation of an unassailable edge.
Yeah. Whether it's a monopoly rent secured through government connections or access to unique capital nobody else has, or an unassailable information advantage gained through secrecy or sheer speed. It's always about that edge.
And the accumulation of wealth across these centuries, it consistently seems to challenge the very notion of a truly free, fair market that operates purely on merit alone, doesn't it?
It really does. The blueprint seems to dictate that true generational success requires not just winning within the existing rules, but actively defining the rules, controlling the essential infrastructure, whatever that may be in the era, and maintaining an exclusive edge that smaller players are just fundamentally incapable of matching.
And if we circle back to maybe the most profound risk raised by the sources the AI revolution, we kind of see the convergence of all these strategies, potentially.
How so?
Well, we discussed how these algorithms threaten white-collar jobs because they're infinitely scalable and they excel at the very information processing humans get paid to do.
Right.
If these data-driven monopolies continue to self-reinforce indefinitely, owning the data that trains the next generation of AI, and if human labor keeps losing its competitive edge against machines, we face a pretty stark challenge.
Yeah, what happens to the fundamental social contract? The assumption that work provides dignity, provides access to prosperity. What happens when a significant portion of the global population is viewed in purely economic terms as well as that useless class, unable to generate the value required to sustain that contract?
That is the structural, maybe existential question that these blueprints for billionaires ultimately force us all to confront, isn't it?
It really is a vital question for all of us to consider as we move forward.
Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
Until next time.